Hey girls, and welcome to Season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey listeners, and welcome back to another week of the Hey Girl podcast. This week is special for so many reasons and also a little bittersweet because this will be our last official interview episode of Season 3. And next week, we have kind of a big life update episode. Nothing like leaving you hanging, but I'm going to have to leave you hanging for the next week. But we've just had a lot going on in the Needham family. If you are a close friend, you're probably already in the know. But if you're a way off listener, then 7 days from now, I promise I'm going to fill you in. But it's a lot of why we are going to cut this season a little bit short from 30 episodes. The good news is, Hey Girl is not done. The sad news is, Hey Girl is going to take an early break, and you'll understand more of that after we talk next week. The even better news is Andy Needham is totally coming on for the last episode. What? I'm going to need him here for us to give all the updates and all the recaps from the season. And oh my goodness gracious, it has been craziness. I feel like the only people that I have seen recently are people who happen to see me in Chick-fil-A where I work, or the people who see me in my house, because those are the two places I feel like I am 100% of the time right now. But lots coming, lots of change are coming. We're excited. God is moving. But I could not think of, I guess a better wrap-up episode or more powerful, inspiring story than the one that we get to share today. This was one of those awesome connections, just a God moment when I was out in Texas with my friend. We were attending the IF gathering, actually, in the Dallas area, and got to meet Jonathan Pitts there. He's going to share his story. Some of you may already know his name or know his family story. Jonathan, his wife Winter, Alina, their daughter. Alina was actually at the IF gathering. They did kind of an interview testimony with her, and then she sang a song, did a special music. It was incredibly powerful. I recognized her immediately because I am a big fan of the movie War Room, and she plays the little girl in that movie. But I got the chance to meet her dad, talk to him for a little while, and we set up this interview, and he not just agreed to, but was so open and available to do this interview and share his story, not only his story, but his wife's story. And I'm telling you, it is powerful. It is also not an easy story. So I always like to give the heads up if you need to grab tissues. Today is probably one of those days you might want some tissues. I know I definitely benefited from having tissues close by, but I just appreciated so much his vulnerability, his openness. I love so much the things that he shared, not just about his own testimony, but about his church and the way that they have served and loved him in this season of life. And so I'm excited for you to hear it. But just a reminder, again, we'll go into this episode. This will be our last interview one. And then next week, Andy and I will be back. We'll do kind of a recap, but probably a bigger portion will be an update on life to let you know what's going on, when you can expect Hey Girl to kind of kick back in once we get through the crazy of all the change. And yeah, we're super excited for it. But before all of that, grab your tissues, maybe a warm blanket, whatever. I guess we're going into spring now. Maybe you need to step out on the porch with a nice cup of iced coffee. And I just hope you are encouraged, and honestly, just that you get to see a really clear picture of who God is, the way that he works, especially through his people in this testimony from Jonathan Pitts. So without further ado, let me introduce you to a new friend and somebody I'm just really honored to have gotten to sit with and hear his story, Mr. Jonathan Pitts. Well, listeners, I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest this week, Jonathan Pitts. We got to meet in Texas, which is awesome because I live nowhere near Texas. So I love when God brings people from very different places, crosses our paths. I was at the IF gathering. Your daughter was singing, giving a testimony, and I got to meet you at the merch table, I believe. Is that the official terminology, merch table? I actually didn't know who you were when I first met you. And then as you were kind of sharing your story, I made the connection like, oh, okay, so this is your daughter. And you were just very, very kind. I mentioned, hey girl, I think in conversation and your willingness to come and share your story. So I am excited. I know a little bit of your story from a distance, and which I'm sure will probably be true of a lot of people, even who listen to this. But one of the things, even from my perspective, like all the way here in Boston, has just been witnessing a family who has walked a really hard road and done so in such a way that has pointed so many people towards Christ and his faithfulness, even in difficult times. So I would love to just take the next little while and let you kind of share who you are for our listeners who are like, I don't even know who this is. Give you the chance to kind of share a little bit of your story, where you come from. I don't know a lot of the background, so this is all new for me too. So first of all, welcome to Hey Girl.
Yeah, well, glad to be on Hey Girl. I have 4 daughters, so Hey Girl is kind of like my world. So,
so it's totally appropriate for you to be on.
I'm not like nervous at all. Hey Girl is just normal, part of the course.
This is your normal audience.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share. I mean, I guess I would say even before I start sharing, is my encouragement is to hear my story kind of through the lens of the fact that it's not just my story, but it's God's story. And it's a story I don't necessarily want. It's one I'm walking and living out that is nothing like I ever would have imagined. But in all of it, like I just sense that God's good and he's kind of leading me on this journey and my girls on this journey. And so backing up all the way to childhood, I actually am a Northeasterner. I grew up in South Jersey, Philadelphia suburb, a little town called Woodstown. And my wife, Winter, I met in college at Drexel University in 2003. And she was from Baltimore, Maryland. And so we basically met, got married 2 weeks after we graduated from college. That was a whole story. Like we both were walking with the Lord sort of. We both were kind of just doing our thing, young, trying to figure out what life was all about. And God really used us to sharpen each other in our faith and to grow each other up in our faith. And so we'd get married. We'd have our oldest daughter, Alina, who turned 15 yesterday. And we lived in New Jersey for about 8 months after graduating high school. And then actually we lived there for about 20 months. And then when Alina was about 8 months old, we would move to Dallas, Texas. And long story short, my wife's uncle is a guy named Tony Evans, who many of your listeners might know. He's a preacher. He's on radio in Boston. He's on radio, but he's a pastor in Texas, godly man. And Winter and I went to visit her uncle. Her uncle was Tony Evans, went to visit him. And long story short, we ended up staying. We went home for a few weeks and we'd move back to Texas and we'd start our life there. We both moved away from our nuclear families, which was probably the healthiest thing we could have ever done because I had a very unhealthy relationship with my family, probably a little codependent, and we just loved football and we loved Jesus and both were great, but I needed to get away from just like family gatherings of, just lots of food on Sundays and sitting in my house for hours on end with my family. My wife's like, hey, can we go to our house? And me being like, we are, like, this is our house with my parents, So we moved to Texas and we'd have another daughter named Caitlin, who's now 12. And my wife, who was a grant writer, so she moved there to be a grant writer. We moved there for her to be a grant writer for her uncle. So she was a grant writer writing for basically a parachurch organization that was attached to Tony Evans' ministry. At the time, it was like an outreach organization that would do all kinds of meeting needs for people in poverty and people without educations and all that. So she was a grant writer. And she told me when we first met in college that she wanted to write a book. And I'm like, well, what do you want to write a book about? She was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, you probably ought to figure that out. Like I said it kind of self-righteously, like I knew the process for like figuring out writing books or whatever. And so long story short, she was a grant writer for 2 years. And really before we had our second daughter, she felt like God was calling her home to be with our girls. And at the same time, and she was like, that was never a desire of hers. Like she, got a bachelor's degree in communications, always wanted to work Her mom was worked. It wasn't like she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, like never felt like that was really her calling, but she felt like God was calling her home. And at the time, I was actually managing a guy named Anthony Evans Jr., who was her cousin, who's a singer, lots of worship projects out. I was managing him and basically started working in the Evans brand of ministry. So Tony Evans, Anthony Evans, they're both kind of, one's a pastor, that's my wife's uncle. Her cousin Anthony, I managed him for 7 years. So I ended up managing him for 7 years. But winter came home, cut our income in half. We're trying to figure out, what does our life look like? I'm trying to figure out, why are we in Texas? And long story short, Winter would come home. She'd get pregnant with twins, which is a whole nother story. And we'd have 2 more girls. And all of a sudden we have 4 girls, a busy home, half of the income we had when she was working. And we're trying to figure out, what are we doing? And, financially, what was cool is that God provided, and we never wanted for anything financially. Winter went through this process of trying to figure out, like, what does life look like as a mom of 4 girls, and felt on most days like the busyness of being a mom of 4 girls was never really all that fulfilling for her. And she told the story tons of times, but she would write down, I think it's Psalms 34:7 or 17. And it says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And she was pretty much, in some level, I would call her depressed on a day in and day out basis, trying to figure out, like, I feel like I've got all the skills and I want to be doing something productive, quote unquote, and never feeling productive in her day to day, because just parenting is just hard work. And, I was traveling, I was on the road. So she just felt like just kind of crazy day in and day out. So long story short, she wrote that prayer down, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. She wrote it down, went in her closet, prayed that prayer, posted it on the wall of that closet. And she already knew that prayer. She already knew that scripture. It wasn't like it was a new scripture to her, but that day she decided to own it. She was like, okay, this means, like, God has me here. I'm going to own this moment. I'm going to own raising my girls. And obviously I was a part of that. It wasn't like I was opting out of that. Like, I was a part of that, but she was just like, I'm going to be a full-time mom and I'm going to figure out, like, what it looks like to do this well. And long story short, Winter did that. And it was really through submitting to what she felt like was God's call for her life, and doing that, God would open the doors for ministry. And so one of the things she realized really early on, at the time our oldest daughter was 6, maybe 7, Alina, Winter was looking for resources for her, like resources for girls of her age to just invest in her. And she couldn't find anything that was, like, age appropriate that was also fun. So, like, if it was appropriate, it'd be like some devotional by someone that didn't really live in that space. Maybe it's an older person, or maybe just the content wasn't really fun, but it was biblical. Or she'd find something that was completely relevant, but it was like talking about relationships and stuff that she's just like, my daughter doesn't need to know about this stuff yet. So long story short, Winter downloaded a free trial of Adobe InDesign and started designing her own. At the time, we called it a thing. It wasn't even it was a thing. Like, she was just designing in Adobe, and she was like, I'm going to create some articles and talk to some of my friends that I have about, like, different topics I know my daughter will love, and kind of put a spin on it to figure out, like, what does it look like? Like, God cares about one of the things she learned is that God cared about every aspect of her life as a girl. Like, she didn't know that when she was growing up. Her mom became a Christian in 1979, the year before Winter was born. And Winter felt like growing up, like, her faith was on Sundays and the rest of her life was Monday through Saturday, and was just didn't realize until probably getting a little bit older. Her dad was a drug addict and she had a pretty complex lifestyle. She grew up in the inner city of Baltimore. Her mom was a godly woman, lived with her mom and her grandmom in a row home in Baltimore. Her dad was a drug addict from before she was born, and so she didn't grow up with him. So she just faced some challenges that a lot of people in our country are facing right now. And but one of the biggest ones for her was, like, not really owning her faith. Like, she thought her faith was Sunday and then the rest of the week was life. But she realized over time that God cared about every aspect of her life. So she began to design this resource saying, okay, God cares. Like, one of her first things she did was an article on Chuck Taylors. And it was like, let's talk about the history of Chuck Taylors. Let's talk about design. Let's talk about, like, just fun things that God cares about. Like, God cares about clothing. It's not like he wouldn't give us clothing if he didn't care about it. Like, he cares about every aspect of our lives. We can talk about it. It can be fun and it can be God honoring. So obviously there's some things that don't honor God, and we talk about those things, but everything else, like, God redeems lots of stuff. So let's talk about it. So long story short, that little free download of Adobe InDesign turned to a second laptop and a second 30-day trial of InDesign, then a third laptop and a third download of InDesign. And it turned into what's called For Girls Like You magazine, which now is a magazine for girls, tween girls aged about 7 to 12. That's a subscriber-based magazine, the ministry called For Girls Like You Ministries. From there, Winter would just invest all of her time when she wasn't momming our girls in that. So she'd be up till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning doing that. And it would just grow. Like she'd go to a couple hundred subscribers and then, you know, just back and forth. And she was a creator. She was not anything else. She did podcasts. She blogged and did lots of stuff like that, all in the tween girl space. And God gave her like this platform to speak to tween girls like the girls we have. And it would be called For Girls Like You, which was kind of random because we were calling the ministry Sprinkles, and then she got a cease and desist by some random magazine, like fishing equipment or something in Florida. So basically, it wasn't fishing, it was something random like that though. But we scrapped it and just said, all right, it's not Sprinkles For Girls Like You, it's just For Girls Like You. And so she grew this ministry brand and this voice to girls. And then from there, she began publishing devotionals and resources for girls. And in about a 5-year span, she published about 10 different resources, which was racehorse kind of stuff. And so Winter's platform, for lack of a better term, quote unquote, was growing. And we started doing ministry together because Winter and I would start like moonlighting for her. And I was running a big national ministry at the time. So I managed Anthony Evans Jr. for 7 years from 2005 to 12. And then I would take over his dad's national ministry, the Urban Alternative, which is a big radio broadcast ministry, from 2012 to really 2018 last year. So 7 years doing that. And all this time I'm moonlighting, helping Winter with her ministry. And I would actually start, because I would help edit. I love to write. So I would edit, copy edit, do all kinds of stuff for her. I'd do accounting, whatever it took, I'd do it. Right. So I did all that. And then in 2017, she and I would publish a book called She Is Yours, a book titled She Is Yours, Trusting God as You Raise the Girl He Gave You. And that was based on a prayer we wrote called She Is Yours. And it basically says, Dear God, I release my daughter into your care. I release my desire to manipulate her, to be her best friend. And basically it was a prayer of surrender that we wrote a 30-day prayer journey. And that 30-day prayer journey for our ministry would turn into that book, all based on prayers about releasing our girls into God's care. So that was just, we were starting to do ministry together, traveling together, speaking together, writing together, which was awesome. At the same time, we're building a marriage and a friendship and a relationship. And on June 27th, 2018, we hit 15 years of marriage. And I would say, like, our marriage, those 15 years was split up in 3 sections. The first 5 years was like realizing, like, wow, like, we're not really good at this. We brought a lot of baggage and sin and expectations and issues into this marriage. The next 5 years were spent kind of working on those things because we were both committed to a godly marriage and doing relationship, friendship, intimacy, all that God's way. And the last 5 years of our marriage in that 15-year section was basically building an intimate relationship and a friendship that I never thought was possible in the first 10 years. And on our 15-year anniversary, it was really awesome. June 27th, 2018, I was like, Winter was a girl that loved surprises, and I wanted to surprise her. And so I heard this song by a group called Caleb and Kelsey, and it's From This Moment and Still the One. It was a mashup of these 2 songs. I think they're both country songs, From This Moment and Still the One. The mashup, and I was like, I want to dance to her to this song, and I got to figure out how to do it creatively. So I did it. A buddy of mine who's really creative helped me. We got this mansion that is around the corner from my house. I didn't live in a mansion, by the way. We just happened to live in a neighborhood that had a mansion, an old mansion in our neighborhood. But the ministry I ran actually took that mansion over and turned it into a studio. And so we got it decorated. My girls were hiding upstairs. It's actually on YouTube now, so if you want to see it, you can maybe put it in your show notes where they can watch that. But
that'd be awesome. What is it listed as?
I think it's Jonathan and Winter Pitt's 15-year anniversary, something like that.
Definitely looking that up.
But anyway, we dance. I basically I got this mansion for my ministry. It's candlelit. We do dinner. I take her shopping at a store that she loved. I take her to dinner, and then we show up at this mansion because my ministry owns it, and it's a studio. And I'm like, one of my employees left the lights on. So we show up. It's candlelit. There's music playing. It's decorated. Her favorite dessert is out, which is melted chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream and Coke. That's sitting out. We sit down, we enjoy dessert, and then the song starts playing. And she and I say, can I have this dance? And we dance to the song. And what's beautiful is, I don't know how, but I was smart enough to record this moment. And it honestly is one of the greatest gifts God has ever given me, in being able to record that moment. Because I look in Winter's eyes, and in Winter's eyes, I see love, that she knows she's fully loved. I see joy. She's enjoying the moment, and I'm doing the same. And it's just a captured moment on our 15-year anniversary of that. Well, fast forward, what's cool is we're married not cool. What's interesting was we were married on June 27th, 2003. So June 27th, 2018, we celebrate our 15-year wedding anniversary. And then 27 days later, so June 27th, we were married. 27 later on July 24th, 2018, we were actually in a transition. Just got to back up a little bit. We were in a transition. I was running this national ministry. Winter was running her ministry, but I was feeling a call to a different aspect of ministry. And so I was accepting a call to go pastor in Tennessee. So on August 1st of 2018, this is about 8 months ago, we were leaving Dallas for me to start a new role. August 1st, I was going to start a new role as a pastor of a church called Church of the City in Franklin, Tennessee. And so I'd already put my resignation in at the Urban Alternative. We were leaving our family, the only family we really had in Dallas, which was my wife's uncle who I worked for. We were leaving all that behind for me to go pastor. So the timestamps are going to get all jacked up here, but July 6th, we sold our house in Dallas. July 9th, we bought our house in Tennessee. July 10th, we moved into that house in Tennessee. We would travel for a week to Iowa to visit my family, and we'd do a family reunion with my family, including my grandmother, our 13 nieces and nephews on my side, all of my siblings, my 4 siblings, their spouses, my parents were all in Iowa enjoying vacation. And then we'd go back to Dallas for one more week before we would go back to Tennessee to start our new life. And in Dallas it was a Tuesday, July 24th. We were working on a marriage book called Emptied at the time. It was actually finished. And on July 24th, 2018 at 3:45, I would turn in the final edited manuscript of that book. I would sign a form, email that to our publisher, and I would go home. Winter texted me, actually. I was on my way home from work, and it was just a neat time because I was excited about the future, and this was my last week of this ministry, which I love this ministry, but it was just an exciting time. So I turned in the book, get in the car to come home, and Winter texted me and said, "I'm not feeling well," and she used the sick emoji, and I just texted her back, and I said, "Well, what's going on?" And she's just like, "Well," actually, she didn't reply. She didn't reply. So I'm like thinking to myself, I don't know what's going on. But she replied earlier to me that day and said, "Hey, I need to finish up my final book," which was a prayer book for girls that comes out in September. She said, "I just need to finish this book. I need you to be like all in tonight," which I knew what she was saying well, because I'd done this many times before. She just needed me to be available and ready and take the kids and do dinner. So I came home with dinner. I came in the house. My sister-in-law was there because my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, Winter's brother, had moved from Baltimore to Texas 2.5 years prior, which was a beautiful thing because Winter got to spend 2.5 years with her brother. But they would leave, and at about 7:45 that night, I'd check on Winter and just say, "Hey, do you want to eat dinner?" And she's like, "No, I feel like I need to lay here." And I'd go in just to kind of floss my teeth after eating ribs with my girls. And Winter would experience, I guess what you'd refer to as like a heart failure. And she would breathe her last breath. And in a very traumatic way for me, as I tried to save her life, and a very traumatic way for my youngest 3 daughters as they were there, we just experienced the horrific, this side of eternity experience of losing a loved one. It was the most difficult moments of my life, and I remember them vividly. Thankfully, my oldest daughter wasn't there. I'm thankful for that. Actually, that weekend before, Winter and Alina, my oldest girl was in the movie War Room. I don't even know if you know that, but it was a movie.
I do know, yeah.
That came out in 2014. So Alina's kind of been a known entity, I guess, in Christendom. She was in that movie, and Winter and Alina traveled together. They spoke together. They wrote together. But Alina wasn't there that day. But that weekend before, they had traveled together. They were speaking together. And they were good friends and just had a strong relationship. But Winter had this, it's called cardiac dysrhythmia, but it's basically her heart just got off rhythm. Thankfully, the experience that we had wasn't the same as hers, because the bottom line for her is her brain stopped receiving oxygen. And Winter, as gracefully and peacefully as she lived on this earth, because she was a graceful, peaceful woman, she left it just as gracefully and just as peacefully. There's a whole lot more to that story in terms of like what would happen in the next moments. But suffice to say, like for me, I was a new pastor. I had accepted this call, hadn't even started my role yet. But I'd been a nonprofit executive and worked in the church. And for me, that became a moment of leading my girls and shepherding my girls through the hardest moment of our lives. And it's been, what has it been? 8 months and a couple weeks of doing that ever since. And one of the neat things, Winter would pass away on that Tuesday. We'd bury her that Saturday. Would celebrate her life. We did the funeral that Saturday. That Sunday, we would bury her and celebrate her life. That Sunday, my girls would actually go to camp. And it was a really neat thing because the Bible camp they were already planning on going to, the girls, they were like, we still want to go. And so they went. But that Friday before the funeral, my oldest daughter, Alina, she said, "Daddy, are we still going to Nashville?" I just looked at her and I was just like, well, we need to pray about it and talk about it. I mean, I could have stayed my role at the Urban Alternative. Like I didn't have to leave. We didn't have our house anymore because we sold our house. But in my mind, it's like, what does a good godly leader do in a situation like this? Well, Alina, who was 14 at the time, barely 14, she says, Daddy, I feel like Mommy wanted to go to Nashville more than anybody. Like, she was excited for you. She was excited for our new life. And I feel like we're supposed to go. And from that moment on, I started speaking as if we were going. The last 8 months has been me shepherding my girls, me not being perfect, failing in a lot of ways, God giving me grace in a ton of ways. Me starting out as a pastor, I took the month of August off. My church has been amazingly generous and what the body of Christ should be. They've been amazing. They've adopted us, and that's a whole story unto itself. I'd start my role in September pastoring, and the greatest honor that I've had in life so far has been taking the ministry that my wife started, that she created with God's inspiration for Girls Like You, and continuing on her legacy through her writings and through her magazine. And so that's been a great joy for me, is continuing Winter's legacy through our girls, because she has 4 girls that have every bit of her inside of them. And then also continuing it through her ministry and her writing. So that's kind of where I find myself now. I'm pastoring, and I'm in my office right now, and I've been doing pastoral stuff and running my wife's ministry, kind of moonlighting. God sent a team of people. What's beautiful is in February of 18, a few months before we'd moved to Nashville, we would hire an editor-in-chief to run the magazine, because Winter was just tired of doing everything. Like, she was publishing books while she was running the magazine, doing everything. We hired an editor-in-chief. And if we did not have her, we would not be able to continue the ministry, because she picked up right where Winter left off. And it's been beautiful to watch. God's grace has been there. It's been rich. God's provision has been there. It's been rich. God's kindness has been there. It's been unreal. And honestly, like, his strength and his peace have been greater forces than I'd ever thought possible before I've walked through this. And so for that, I'm grateful.
I love your description of the church showing up, how the church should. I don't know even if you necessarily have specific examples, but I'm just trying to imagine, obvious senior pastor. Is that your title? Are you the lead pastor? I don't know.
I'm executive pastor, so I'm kind of like the number 2 guy.
Gotcha.
We have a family of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 churches. And then we have a sister church actually in New York City. But I'm kind of the executive pastor that kind of leads primarily at our main, the biggest campus we have. But I kind of give leadership in all of them.
Right.
And, but what was beautiful, like, I might never forget my boss, Darren. His name's Darren Whitehead. He's a senior pastor at Church in the City. He called me and said, hey, like, if you guys want to stay in Dallas, like, we support you. Like, we'll figure out, like, getting your stuff back. We'll figure out selling your house. Like, we'll figure it all out. Don't stress about it. Take your time. No rush. But he said, but if you come, you'll find a family that's ready to adopt you like nothing you've ever seen. And, you know, you can hear people say that, but to experience it, I mean, everything from they took up kind of a fund for us that's supported us, and lots of random things that you would never think about you have to deal with, from legal stuff to my girls' bedrooms, like just wanting to do things for us that, like, my wife would have wanted that I wouldn't even have the mind. So there have been women in our church that have come around my girls and I that literally did like a home remakeover on our home. And our home wasn't an old home. Nobody's ever lived in our home. It's a new home. And the walls were white. And I'm like, perfect. The walls are white. And they came in and painted the girls' bedrooms the colors they wanted them, and did like a whole makeover on their rooms with the colors they wanted. And my one daughter loves unicorns. There's unicorns everywhere. And they came alongside of us with a meal train that supported us for the first couple of months. School pickups, like anything you can think of that would make my life crazy, they've been supportive with. I also need to say my sister is 40. My oldest sister, I have 3 sisters and a twin brother, identical twin brother. My oldest sister, Carmen, 41 years old, never been married, never had kids, has been praying for a family for years and years. And the day of my wife's funeral, she said, Jonathan, if you need me, like, God told me I'm there. And I was like naive enough to think like, I'm good. Like, I just said to her, like, okay, I'll think about it. And I came to Nashville without her. And like 2 weeks into that, I'm like, call Carmen. So I called her. I'm like, hey, is that offer still on the table? Like, just to come help me out. And she's been with me since Labor Day. And she has been a surrogate mom to my girls and a surrogate wife. I mean, when you think about like what we are to be as helpmates to each other, like what that looks like, my sister has jumped in, and obviously she can't replace my wife, but she has filled in massive gaps just because I'm by myself. And I thank God for my sister, because there's no way I can pastor. There's no way our book still came out January 8th. Our marriage book came out, and I've been promoting that and doing podcasts and traveling some and taking my girls with me. And Carmen has been there. She cooks. She loves to cook. She has been what she would have wanted to be for her own girls. She's being her girls, because right now they are her girls. Like, they're Winter's girls. They'll always be Winter's girls. But God was like, I'm taking Winter home and I'm going to put Carmen in to fill this gap. And she's going to be like a mother to the motherless. Like when the Bible says that I'll be a mother to the motherless, like God's not talking about some spirit never land. He's talking about his people, like filling in real gaps and real needs. And so it's been really neat to see my sister, who I used to pinch and, make fun of and harass, made her to be a mother to the motherless. And that is a beautiful thing to me. And so, but the church they've just surrounded us, and there's many more ways they've surrounded us. Like one of the members of the church came and actually picked us up. Like he has a plane. He's like, I don't want them to have to, we had a dog and there's 5 of us and my cars are all everywhere. Like he's like, I'm going to come get them and pick them up. And he brought us back here, and my dog, my Yorkie Poo, flew with us, and my wife was, I mean, it's the little things. Like I'm telling you, like that's extravagant. Like that's extravagant love from God to like say, and that's not like, I don't expect anything like that ever. But my Yorkie Poo is on the plane with us. And I'm thinking about the fact that my wife for like a month and a half was nervous about how are we going to get Max back, and the car ride is going to be crazy, and or should we ship him on a plane and all that. And God's been like above and beyond all you can ask or think type stuff God has done for us, like above and beyond all you can ask or think. And to the point where I don't feel like I deserve it. And the only way I've been able to, and I don't, but the only way I've been able to accept it is to rationalize, but my girls are worth it. My girls are worth it. And for me, it's taught me humility, because as a man, like I want to be this guy that can provide for myself and I've had to accept help in ways I've never thought that I'd even ever have to, accept help before. And like one of the biggest gaps I realize is like even Christmas, like I thought about the fact that I can buy presents for my girls, but like my wife loved Christmas and loved wrapping presents and loved all that kind of stuff. Well, if you saw the spread that a few people in my church came around me, and like the Christmas tree looked so beautiful. And again, like that's extravagant stuff. That's not like the basic needs. That's that's the extravagant love of God that I'm really grateful for. And I would never expect it, but God's provided it. And that came by way of the church, because the church was surrounding us from the very beginning. And they didn't know me from Adam. Like I'm a new entity to them, a new guy. Yeah, really grateful.
I think that's awesome for people to hear too, who maybe are walking alongside people, regardless of what the nature of the struggles that they're facing, that sometimes it is those things that we could show God's love. I love that, like decorating a Christmas tree or whatever it is. So,
well, for me, now, I don't want to just help provide for people's needs. Like I want to show people the extravagant love of God. So when I think about how I can come alongside people, not people that just are grieving loss of a loved one, but people are grieving all kinds of stuff, like loss of a marriage, there's all kinds of stuff that people are losing and grieving, loss of a job. Like, so in my mind now, it's like, how can I extravagantly come alongside somebody and surprise them with how good God is? Not just meet the basics, and I only know that now because I've experienced it.
So as a dad, you've got, 3 girls and 4 girls, sorry. Twins, that's right. Oh, you know what it was? I wrote their 2 names, but you didn't say your twins' names.
Oh, Cameron and Olivia.
Cameron and Olivia.
We call them Yummy and Lovey.
Oh, that's adorable. So with 4 girls, and you mentioned like Alina was really close to her mom. How has that journey been in terms of your relationship with your girls in the last 8 months? And as you said, even I was just thinking about even the struggle there would be to want to protect your family unit. And I just think it's a beautiful picture of you allowing people into those spaces with your kids and recognizing like, okay, I can't actually be everything right now for them. I need help.
Yeah. Well, it's 2 things. One, it's a balance, because I'm understanding, like, you move into a new church family and it can be overwhelming. Like for me, like I've got an engine that never stops. And so from a relationship perspective, it's easy for me to accept. It's hard for me to accept the actual generosity. It's easy for me to accept relationship. My girls are all really different, so they do relationship differently. Like I've got 2 very introverted girls and 2 very extroverted girls. And so for the introverted girls, like it can be overwhelming to feel like the weight of the relational pressure. So even as we've accepted, I've had to be mindful to not allow them to be overwhelmed, and in some ways protect them from being overwhelmed relationally and give them space and margin. And a couple of them aren't super comfortable with having to talk like how I'm talking now. They're not comfortable like that. They don't want to share their grief with everybody. Like I'm comfortable with that. And a couple of my girls are, and I'm not saying names on purpose, by the way, but like a couple of my girls are really comfortable with sharing, a couple aren't. And so I'm just really mindful to, not expect them to be me or do me, And so the other thing I'm realizing is, in some ways I've actually been in wanting to protect them. I actually discovered last week that I've developed a level of codependency where I'm wanting to overprotect, shelter, and how their moods are, it affects my moods. I never knew what codependent really meant until I actually realized I was codependent. And, one of the things I did, so the book, She Is Yours, which my wife and I did together, I want to read the prayer because I think it's a great prayer for anybody it's good in any relationship, but this was a prayer that my wife and I wrote specifically for our girls years ago. And it came out of a heart to release our girls to God and not to overprotect. So it says, "Dear God, I release my daughter into your care. I surrender my desire to control her. I surrender my desire to manipulate her future. I surrender my tendency to overprotect, shelter, and suffocate her. I surrender my desire to be her best friend first. I surrender my own dreams for her. I surrender my need to be her source. She is yours. I'm totally open to you, dependent on you, and desperate for you to be in control as I let go. I'm relying on the fact that you are God and that you have created my daughter for your purpose and for this time. I pray that you will draw her to yourself. I pray that she will delight in you. I pray that you will be patient with her. I pray that you will provide for her. I pray that you will bless her. I pray that you will use her to be a blessing to others. I pray that you will mature her, and ultimately I pray that she will show Jesus in her very being. I trust in your sovereignty. I wait in expectation for your providence. Lord, she is yours, and I trust you with her." And I actually think about that prayer in two ways. For me as a dad right now, it's like I cannot be her everything. It's impossible. So, Lord, she is yours, and I trust you with her. I actually pulled that prayer, is framed it on our wall in our bedroom, and I actually pulled it off my wall. I turned it over, and I wrote the date when I realized that I was kind of in this codependent space. And I just asked God to just make that prayer my reality and just to trust him completely with them. But I also think about that prayer from the lens of Winter, where Winter is I imagine her Jesus basically saying, "Winter, I'm bidding you home. It's time to come home." And her literally saying, "All right, God, that prayer that I wrote, I'm releasing my daughter into your care even as I come home." And so that's been a very special prayer for me. You can actually pray that prayer for boys and just take out she and put he. But ultimately, there's just this reality that trusting God in the middle of our circumstances is really the best thing that we can do, because we can't control them and we can't control the people that are around in their circumstances. So just trusting God completely. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but.
No, not at all. I was going to say you could easily now release a second book and just replace every she with he. Be I would like to release a sequel now. First of all, that's a beautiful prayer. I think all of us should frame that and put it on our walls. Just a thought. I'm often thinking about people who are listening, who are either walking through difficult things, who are relating in that space, or maybe kind of really raw in that space. At least from my own experience, it can be really easy to get a lot of expectations on ourselves about how we walk that, especially when you have any type of platform where people are looking in and are watching. And as a pastor, like you said, you have, you're shepherding people, and then you have your daughters, and obviously your family has, you're tight with your family. So your family's watching. I wonder from you, if you were speaking to someone who is in that place right now and wrestling with that, how they feel like they should show up, if there's anything that God's really shown you along the way in terms of grace for yourself, or how do you, because I'm just thinking grief in general, I hear it all the time, grief isn't something you just get past. It doesn't show up that way. So I'm wondering what you have learned, or what God has showed you, however that is, in terms of actually walking through this in an honest way, when you do feel like, you're leading people in the midst of that.
Yeah. So, one, I'm really grateful for my boss and good friend, Darren, who basically was like, "Hey, I want you to know we're here for you. And I want you to know you don't have to put on, the expectation from my own church leadership not to have to put on a front." My counselor, I would recommend counseling for anybody that's walking through this. been not a cheap thing, but it's been a worthy thing. My counselor said to me that when people are grieving, they tend to stay in the past. Like they don't want to get out of the past. So they think about where they were, and it's hard to come out of that. Or they push into the future, like trying to just move past it. They push into the future, push into the future. And he said, but God is in the present. Like we can only be with God in the present. So show up for today. And show up for today, whatever that looks like. So one of the things I've tried to do is to show up for the day and not, like for me, the tendency isn't to stay in the past. Like I honestly, like, and this is just my build. This is how God has made me. Like I tend to dwell on the positive of what I had. Like I think about Winter and the fact that 1, I didn't deserve her. 2, I think about all that had to happen for me to meet her and all that had to happen for me to win her after being an idiot a lot of the times. All that had to happen for me to have 4 girls with her. All that had to happen in the miracle of life for us to have 15 years of marriage together. The fact that we made it 15 years and 27 days and not 14 days, not 14 years. And, you know, there are all these things. The fact that we finished a marriage book together, the fact that God allowed us to do ministry together. Like I try to just dwell on the positive of what I had. And I also try to have an eternal perspective of what's actually happening. See, I told my girls when Winter passed, like as I'm meeting with them and I'm having to tell them for the first time their mom's gone, I said to them, like, the reality is that what we're experiencing and what is happening are 2 different things. Like we're experiencing the loss, which is real. Like we're experiencing the loss of someone that is dear to us. But what mommy's experiencing is something altogether different. And the moment that mommy left this earth is not the moment that where God stopped loving her, but it's a moment where God's love got all the more real for her. Like she's experiencing the fullness. You know, there's no more like looking in the mirror dimly, as Paul would say for her. Like she's seeing Jesus face to face. And so I try to dwell on the positive, but my tendency and my escape is to push into the future. Like I'm going to just, you know, and what I realized really early on is as I'm doing that, I'm actually dragging 4 girls. Like think about me being a horse and I've got these 4 wheels on my wagon that I'm pulling my 4 girls, and the faster I go, the more wobbly they get. And so for me, like what I've had to learn is not to race into the future, but to be present. And being present is showing up for me, but it's also showing up for them. So if you're a parent and you're going through this, it's like, you got to show up for them as much as you show up for yourself. And so for me, the hardest part of my grief has been shepherding my girls through it. Because I think it's like, as a man, it's easy to care less about yourself because you're caring for others. And as a mom or as a dad, like you care more about your kids than you care about yourself. But to care about yourself and to care about them, you have to be present for today. So that's been, you know, God's word to me pretty much every day since this happened is just show up, be present. Don't avoid. Because I think you can go to the past to avoid and go to the future to avoid, but being present, you can't avoid, you know? So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of what I wanted to say.
No, that was powerful. I was thinking about one of the things, I don't remember who first said it to me. It might've been one of my counselors or a mentor was speaking in, and I don't remember what I was wrestling with, but I was describing it to her. And she actually stopped me with kind of similar wisdom of, I feel like you think that God's waiting for you on the other side of this. And that's where he's going to meet you, that you just have to get through it. And she's like, but you just need to pause and recognize that he's holding you in it. Yeah. And that was, we call them aha moments, but that was like an aha moment for me of realizing how true, like I was trying to push to the future past the hurt of now to get to, okay, God's got healing on the other side of this. Yeah. And I believe that, so I want to get to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's like we want to skip the process and just get to but God is with us in that. It's basically the same thing said a different way. And that's been my experience. So now, like, yeah, there's a part of me that, if I'm being honest with you, would love to be a year from the day that Winter died. Like I'd love to be a year and a day from when she died. Like just to kind of like, that's going to solve it. Like that's going to make it go away. Like the reality is it's not, but I would love to push down the road because, you know, it stinks to, you know, sit in my bedroom at night right now and start watching some show on Netflix and realize I actually don't really want to do this. And I look over and I see the blanket that somebody made for me with all these pictures of Winter and me and my girls, and realize in that moment that I'm super lonely and it'd be great not to be by myself and it'd be great to not have this experience. But like the reality is that God's doing something in that process. And he's with me in that process. And I don't know why. Like, I have no idea. Like, why is Winter not here? I have no idea. Like, on my worst days, I don't get angry, but I get really annoyed. Like, I'm annoyed that, like, why would God take her away? Like, on Thanksgiving Day, on Thanksgiving morning, we're preparing food. And all my family, my 4 siblings, my parents, some friends are all at my house in Tennessee and we're enjoying each other. And I'm just like, I can't wait to be here. Like, that's annoying. But for whatever reason, like, that's where God wants me to be. And it's okay. Like, I don't have to hide that I'm annoyed, like I tell God, like, I'm annoyed, like, this is kind of annoying, But I also, for me, it's like, okay, I'm built to understand, okay, God, what are you doing? And honestly, like, turning our marriage book in the day that she died, the fact that we were able to do ministry together, the fact that she has this ministry that I'm carrying on, like, I sense this significant purpose, this weight of purpose that God has me in. And that for me has been really redemptive. And I just have this sense that no matter what somebody's going through, if they look for God, they'll find redemption in it. And it might be, it might not be, the timeline might not look like mine. The thing might not look like mine. I don't know why I feel like God's kind of chosen to display our story for the world to see. It's not in the world, you know what I mean? Like, just for some to see. And for me, it's actually been helpful. Even like when I get to share, like, my emotions, actually, I can feel more when I share than when I'm just sometimes I can feel kind of numb when I'm just sitting by myself in my grief. And so, like, being able to share has been helpful and healing for me. I don't know what it is about it, but yeah.
So it's been 8 months. Is that what we said? 8?
Yeah, I think it was 8 months, March 24th, which was my birthday, my 39th birthday. So that was not fun.
So 8 months out, I know you talked about the different things that your church has done, that people have done. What does it look like for people to love you, to support you, to come alongside of you? I've heard it said a lot, and it's always been something that's been a burden to me when I watch friends go through things. In the wake of things, everybody's at the door. And then time passes and, it gets quieter. And I'm sure there's some comfort in that, especially if you have some introverted kids who are happy to see the crowds kind of disperse. But what does it look like these last weeks, or maybe even just a month or two, for people to love you now, this many months out?
For me, the experience has been a little bit different because as a pastor, like, I'm so public facing. So I'm actually having to realize now that I'm having to choose to kind of push some of that away. And that's probably a different experience than some. What's neat for me, we have a guy in our church, one of our staffers, that had a series of mini strokes earlier this week. And I'm this guy grieving that's watching this family go. And thank God he's going to fully recover, we believe. Like, God's kind of spared him a lot of that. But I watched his community come around him, and it makes me grateful to be a part of the church that I'm in, because, like, they're there. Like, he needs like 24-hour coverage right now, and people there, and they're there. And so, like, the beauty of the church, if we really press into it, is that we have deep and meaningful relationships where it's not like people just showing up for a moment and they're back out, because they're your people, they're your family. So I think right now we have, like, this epidemic of churches that do church on Sunday, and there's not a lot of deep relationships, and I'm not really known. And, even in our church, we've got, on any given Sunday, we'll have, close to 5,000 people at our church. And the ones that press into community, that have people that they are doing life with, there's no substitute for community. Like, there's no substitute for it. And so for me, I'm probably a little bit overwhelmed with it all. And then this point in my life, I'm realizing, okay, I got to slow it down. I can't accept one more dinner for my girls. Like, I cannot have one more family at this point. I need to give them just some margin and some breathing room. And so for me, that's just honesty. Like, people ask, like, hey, can we do this or do that? I'm like, hey, actually, my girls just need a little bit of a break. And that's a hard thing to say, especially because I'm a people pleaser. My wife was not a people pleaser, and it was easier for her. So oftentimes I can hear Winter saying to me, like, Jonathan, like, enough is enough. Just relax. Like, because ultimately people want to be helpful, but even some of the people that want to be helpful, aren't necessarily a part of my deep community. They're just in my sphere, Right. And I'm hoping there's not a lot of people from my church listening to this podcast. I don't want to offend anybody. It's just the reality of, like, at this point, I want the people that know me the best to be close to me. Those that don't, maybe they'll get close to me, and maybe they'll get close to somebody else. But there are other people grieving in our congregation, so I want them to get close to them, And so anyway, again, I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Yeah. And I actually think that's really good wisdom for people who are prone to guilt when they see people walking through hard things, to remember that you don't have to suddenly become someone's inner circle because they're grieving. Like, even just the allowing people to have their own people. Now, there's obviously instances where people they don't have community and you got to step in.
Yeah.
But I also think there's truth in, we can't be everything for everyone in any instance. And so,
yeah, and I think my encouragement to anybody listening that isn't in rich, deep community is, what is Proverbs says, with all you can get understanding. Like, to me, in regards to community, with all you can get understanding is with all you can, like, find meaningful relationships. There's going to come a day where that's all that's going to matter. And I'm telling you, the moment that Winter passed away and the hours after she passed away, the only thing that mattered were the relationships that I had. Like, it doesn't matter how much money I had. Doesn't matter how well known my name is. None of that matters. It's like, how deep are your relationships? That's all that matters. And so with all you can, gain relationships. And sometimes that's hard. Like, relationships are hard. I think we push away because they're hard and they're difficult, and life can be easier, living life independently. But relationships are all that matter in the end. Yeah.
I love that. What a good note to end on. Everybody get out there and push into relationships. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's hard. And I think most of us, if we're being honest, have some deficiency in relationship. We all have a deficiency in relationship, but most of us, if we put in a little more work, we'd have more of it. And I'm speaking that for myself as well. Like, because it's easy to stay surfacey, social media, church these days, oftentimes, like, all this stuff is designed for surface level relationships. So without getting beyond and getting out from behind our phones and getting out from behind our Sunday morning programming, like, without doing that, you're not going to find meaningful relationships. So it means doing stuff that right now these days seems kind of awkward, like showing up at a meal or another, like a gathering of, like, less, like, it's like all of the world pushes away from that and pushes towards surfacey, less meaningful stuff. What does it look like to find more meaning? Well, you're going to find it in relationships. What does it look like to find a relationship? So.
No, that's so true. And I know it's what I appreciate about our church is they push heavy into, we call them life groups. I know there's different names, but community groups basically. And the point is, when you get to a certain size at a church and it's, in that 1 hour where, most of it, you're sitting in a service, that's not where you're going to build community. It's going to be outside the walls. So.
Yeah. And not only to have that for yourself, but to be that to somebody else. Like,
yes,
the more you know people, the more you can actually give authentic care and authentic love. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And it's really what we find our richest meaning in life.
Amen. Well, Jonathan, I appreciate so much you sharing your story. And I know it's been powerful for me. You had a lot of good mic drop moments. I was like,
it's hard to drop the mic on my MacBook Pro here. Like, I think I'll break it if I drop it. So.
I was gonna say, don't drop the MacBook Pro. That's a bad idea.
No, I'm just really glad to be on with you. Glad that you'd consider my story one worthy bringing on to the Hey Girl podcast. So.
Yep. I don't think I told you this, but we have a terminology for our guys, and just for your sake, they're for the listeners, not necessarily the guy guests. But we were discussing this when we found out that there were men that listened to the podcast. This is before we ever had a male on as a guest. And I was like, man, we have to create like their own group. Like, this is, this audience. So we decided that we would title them the podcast's male subscribers and nickname them the PMSers. And we gave them their own logo. They've got stickers there. Yeah. So you've given them one more guy to listen to.
Hey, glad to help support the PMSers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. And we will continue, I'm sure, our listeners praying for your family, as I'm sure still transitioning. You're still fairly new in this role at your church. Yeah, and so
I still feel brand new. Yeah. But thank you for your prayers, and I'm glad.
Okay, listeners, you've met Jonathan. You've heard his story. If you're anything like me, you've had some ugly cries along the way, but what an incredibly powerful testimony from him, and just God's faithfulness and the power of just when the church is the church in your life, and how they step up and serve, and just people showing up from family members to everything else. It was incredible to hear him share. And I don't know, the ministry that God is doing through his life, I know that it is making an impact to people. I know for the listeners, I'm sure for you guys, that God spoke through that story. And I like to always think about one or two things that stood out. And I have to say, in this season, even just the things that we're walking through, the reminder in this conversation that God is present. He's present today, that he's in today, and that this is where I need to show up. This is something I am wrestling to the floor with right now, to be honest, because I'm in this place, and maybe you've been there or you are there, where you know that 6 months from now, life's going to look a lot different. And it seems in some ways so far away, in some ways just around the corner, but it's so hard to just stay present, because you're like, okay, if that's where we're going, let's just get there. And I for sure needed the reminder that yes, God is moving and change is happening, and there's a lot stirring in my life, I'm sure in your life too. If it's not right now, it has been before, or you're headed into it, but that God is calling us to remain present, to walk with him in the everyday. And so today, as I listen to the story, as we share this testimony with you, I just pray that God spoke to you today, wherever you are at, that he, through Jonathan's story, through the legacy of his wife, which, my goodness, Winter, if you can, and you can continue to look up the different things. I know Jonathan mentioned that she was a part of from their magazine that continues on. I bought, actually, my daughter one of Alina's books, one of the books that his daughter's written. I highly, highly recommend any of those things that they put out, from books to the magazine, different parts of their ministry, the legacy of his wife, and the fact that God's allowed him to continue that on. And even like he said, having the person in place so that when everything happened, though obviously he even said, I think at the very beginning, that this isn't necessarily what he would choose, but this is what he's walking. This is the life that God's called him to, that with all of that happening, that God already had in place someone that could carry on this ministry to girls that his wife began. And I just think that's an incredible testament to what God was doing and continues to do, not just through her life as she lived it here on earth, but continues to do through her legacy. And what an incredible thing for her daughters to be a part of as well. So continue to pray for their family. I know he said it in his story, and it's true. They're not even a year out from losing Winter, and that's a big deal. Any of you who have gone through significant loss know that, especially they talk about that first year, going through firsts of everything. And so continue to pray for them as they walk that journey. Pray for their daughters, for the girls, for Jonathan, for their church, for the family. If you have a moment, and you can, I know it would mean a lot if you could send in just encouraging words for him. You can reach out to them directly. You can send it to us and we can pass it along. But I know that every time you as listeners have taken the time to write in and let these people know, hey, this is how your story really impacted me. It's meant so much to each and every one of our guests. And so thank you for those who have done that. We continue to encourage you to do that. And over these next weeks, as we kind of take a break from Hey Girl, we go into crazy. Again, big update week next week. I just want to encourage you, keep running your race in your place, wherever God has you. I know for myself, and I'm probably preaching to myself, sometimes it just seems easier to get to the other side, but God's with us in today, and we don't want to miss it. So keep an eye out, be aware, be faithful to him today. Thank you so much again for listening. Without you, none of this would be possible. We're so grateful for every single one of you that tune in every week. I hope you have an amazing week. Bye.